Yes, I know it should be a Wheeler Dealers Week video. However, I found this really interesting story while researching something else, so I thought to get it out there before anyone else did. So, did Sir Clive Sinclair really look to buy Lotus? Well, let me tell you what I found. First off, we've got to go back in time to the days of the DeLorean Motor Company. And for those of you who don't know about it, John DeLorean, American car executive, came over, used £85 million of government cash to build a factory in Northern Ireland. They started producing cars in 1981 and they went bust in early 1982. Now, involved with this company, with DeLorean, was the Lotus car company. They'd done quite a lot of development on the car. I think they were involved particularly with the chassis and suspension side. And when the DeLorean started to fall apart, there started to be questions asked about where the money had gone. And in late 1982, Colin Chapman, the owner of Lotus, sadly died of a heart attack. And the questions sort of got ramped up as what has happened to all this money. So, early 1983, the family, or the Chapman family, really is starting to look to offload Lotus. So where are we at? So we've got in early 1983, we've got a car production facility in Northern Ireland, which is empty. And we've got a Lotus car company, which is up for sale. So enter Sir Clive Sinclair. Darling of British computing, he made his money selling digital watches, small desktop calculators, and then into the ZX81 and Spectrum home computers, which I'm sure a lot of you would have had in your youth, with that particular Spectrum with that rubber keyboard. And he long held an interest in building an electric car, as he described it, rather than electric vehicle, which we'll come to in a minute. And his first electric vehicle was the Sinclair C5, and there's a common narrative here that actually Lotus had quite a lot of involvement in the design of the chassis and a lot of the development and getting it sort of compliant to regulations and so on. But later on, Lotus did rather distance themselves for reasons you'll find out in a minute. Now, Sir Clive Sinclair hired a chap called Barry Wills. Who's he, I hear you ask? Well, Barry was a senior executive with companies in the past like Jaguar, British Leyland, and he'd been very close to the top of like Reliant Cars. And in 1978, he'd actually joined DeLorean, and he'd been there virtually the whole way through. I think he believed he was the longest serving employee there. And Sir Clive Sinclair had hired him to basically productionise his first electric vehicle, the C5. Now, it seems a bit odd. Someone who's a senior executive of these big car companies, why has he gone and joined like a startup EV company? It doesn't sort of tie up to me. Well, in Barry's own words,
vehicles.
I was only going to do it if you'd buy Lotus. That was the deal.
Mm.
I knew the deal could be done because Colin Chapman had died.
Mm.
The Chapman family wanted to get rid of it.
Now, being cynical, of course, Sir Clive could have told Barry he was going to buy Lotus just to get him on board. It's a way of getting a top-end car executive down working for Clive's startup EV business. However, with a bit of a further investigation, it appears not, because on the Slugger O'Toole website, there are these pictures of the documents that have only just been released, I think after a 40-year confidentiality period. And these documents are government documents of the Industrial Development Board at the time, and this is from June 1983. And it details how Sir Clive has been given what they call option, which is basically first refusal, on the plant and machinery at the former DeLorean Dunmurry factory. And the reason he's after that is he wants to start car production even there in 1985, so that's 2 years later. But it's saying that he's in the process of trying to buy a controlling interest of Lotus Cars. Now, this is a government document, so you don't really get too much better than that. I'll put a link to Slugger O'Toole's website because there's some more information around that if you want to do some further reading. But ultimately, Sir Clive's attempts to buy Lotus didn't complete, and the deal that Clive was trying to buy Lotus with was actually taken on by a guy called David Wickens, who owned British Car Auctions, and he completed that deal in 1983. Barry Wills himself, he stayed on with Sinclair Electric Vehicles. This was very much, in 1983, the early start of the development of it, mainly because, in his own words,
Clive was paying me particularly well in those days. I didn't feel it appropriate to have a fitty and resign or anything. I decided to take his money and get on with it.
if you want to read more about Barry and all the adventures he had, particularly during that period with the Sinclair C5, he's produced a book, and I will drop a link to it in the description below. And he's had a lot more involvement across a lot of cars that you probably know of. So what were Sir Clive's plans for the Dunmurry factory? Well, to find out, I've actually come across this great article on LinkedIn by Grant Sinclair, who is the nephew of Sir Clive himself. And what he explains is that Sir Clive's plan was to sell in 1985, the year that the C5 was launched, around about 100,000 C5s for the original price of £399. And this was going to kickstart the investment for his C10, which was his next one that was going to come along, which was a two-seater electric vehicle. But as we know, the C5 was a bit of a flop. They only actually manufactured 15,000 of them. So it was a bit of a commercial failure, as we know. So in summary, yes, Sir Clive Sinclair did try to buy Lotus, but as the C5 was such a flop, it's probably good that he didn't. Hope you enjoyed that. Please hit like and subscribe.